The first laugh was quiet, a ripple against the varnished benches and the frosted glass pane that made the courtroom feel like a refrigerator trying to be polite. I could see my name printed in black on the thin plastic tag clipped to my blazer. Last name misspelled with that drifting vowel that always turns my blood a degree colder. The clerk handed it to me as if it were a napkin. Across the aisle, my ex-wife's cousin snorted. Then the attorney with the bright tie smiled into his legal pad as if the paper had told a joke. The judge didn't look up. It was the smallest possible humiliation, the most efficient kind, and it warmed their faces like a lamp. They called my case number. I stood, a ceiling vent hissed. A bailiff scratched at the seam of his belt. I counted the clicks of a ballpoint pen somewhere behind me like a metronome for the kind of day you don't forget. I felt the aircon riding against the sweat at my neck, and for a second, I saw my daughter's fingers pressing into blue Play-Doh at the kitchen table, the ring of sunlight on the tile like a target I could never reach. The attorney in the bright tie leaned toward the table microphone. "Your Honor," he began, "we object to the petitioner's presence near the child until the home study concludes. He is, in effect, a stranger. He can't even get his own name straight." A neat laugh, rehearsed for the record, and the cousin's shoulders shook. I glanced down at the tag again. Asan Rahi becomes Ashan Rahi. Some days it's a typo. Today it was a script. My lawyer, Tamina, placed one fingertip on the copy of our motion and pressed a lighthouse touch, saying, "Wait." In the next minutes, I told myself, you'll see how a syllable tries to steal a father. I felt my throat dry and picked up the paper cup of water, the plastic soft and warm like an apology overdue from last winter. The judge asked for preliminary remarks. I put the cup down, centered it on the condensation ring it had made. "Your Honor, this is a hearing," I said, voice steady as a door slowly closing, "not a rehearsal for who gets to be clever. My name is on my daughter's birth certificate, on the mortgage, on the school pickup list. This tag I let the plastic swing once under the fluorescent light is a piece of plastic." I heard the attorney whisper to the cousin, both of them moving as if to a cue. I caught a tiny flick. The cousin's mouth formed the same phrase I had heard last week in the hallway. "Keep it light." The phrase was a seed. It would root later. When they called a recess for scheduling, we spilled into the corridor. The floor smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. Lawyers passed each other like taxis, exchanging nods that looked like invoices. My neighbor, who had come because she said a courtroom can bend the spine of anyone standing alone, handed me a mint and nodded at my tag. "I hate that," she said. "No one else is wearing theirs. Seems I'm not family." It came out without heat, a sentence I'd say again, and in saying it, understand it had teeth I didn't show yet. Near the stairwell, a camera watched us from above, a bulletin board layered with notices. Mediation hours, a lost scarf, a charity bake sale flyer turned gray at the edges. The cousin's laugh shivered the glass in the trophy case that protected some retired judge's photo. He said to nobody and everybody he'll trip himself. He's not a paperwork guy. The bright tie attorney didn't stop him. He held his phone at his chest, thumb moving. I noted the logo of the device cased those small details that later, under the right light, become anchors. The courtroom resumed. The guardian ad litem Misbah spoke about routines and playdates and quiet hours. When the attorney pushed a printout of my bank statement and said, "He moved money between accounts 3 times in 1 week," I didn't flinch. I explained end of month sweep, certificates coming due. Numbers become accusations when you are labeled with air. The judge asked if a home camera existed at my apartment. And bright ties slid in. "He claims it does, but we've seen no authenticated footage." He smiled, almost tender. "He's a project manager. He documents things." They made quotation marks with their eyebrows. The cousin scribbled something, then folded the paper into a clean, cruel square and slid it into his pocket without looking. When we adjourned on the scheduling motion, filed my first request with the court clerk, a notice to preserve surveillance footage from the courthouse corridor, dated and time-stamped 15 minutes before and after our recess. The clerk blinked, looked at Tamina, then at me. Chain of custody, she asked. I nodded. Her nails clicked the keyboard like a code being executed. The cousin still had the laugh in his teeth. Outside, the afternoon was hard and brassy. Karachi sidewalks radiate heat like advice that comes too late. I tilted my head against the glare and could almost hear my mother saying, "Don't hurry and don't dawdle. Either way, someone will say, you're wrong." The smell of frying chilies from the canteen downstairs threaded through the lobby as we waited for the elevator. And I filed mentally the first of my open loops. The phrase, "keep it light," the misprinted tag. The bright tie smile like an appointment. Evidence doesn't only arrive, sometimes it collects. At home, my living room was an operations center disguised as a couch. On the coffee table, there were 3 folders: custody, finance, comes. My daughter's drawing of a purple fish taped above the TV reminded me that dignity is a process you teach by doing it slowly. I opened my laptop and executed what I had promised myself the night I got served. No shouting, only process and receipts. I wrote a targeted discovery request concerning communications between the cousin and counsel that might touch on courtroom conduct or intimidation. I drafted a subpoena duces tecum for the courthouse surveillance system vendor. Chain of custody form attached. Witness list pending. I pinged Ali, an IT forensics consultant I had used once when a vendor tried to pass off stock photos as installation verification. I asked him to be available to review footage metadata for frame rate anomalies and time drift, if and when obtained. I called the bank. The assistant manager, a steady woman named Shazia, who once watched me count out coins with my daughter and smiled like it was a liturgy, faxed me my last 6 months of account logs with a certification stamp. Wire confirmation numbers lined up like a defensive wall. I then emailed the school principal, Yusuf, and asked for the pickup and drop-off logs, politely requesting that any redactions not encompass the guardian ad litem. I CC'd Mizpah, who replied within an hour. Received, thank you. Please include PTA volunteer list. Timestamps are a kind of love letter to sanity. 2 days later, in the oven hum of July, I walked into Huda's kitchen and spread the documents on her table. Her cat made a circle and sat on my discovery requests, like a small furry judge. They laughed at your name, Huda said, so they think you'll shout. Don't make them read. We reviewed in the bank logs. The cousin's transfers he'd once asked me to help him open a digital wallet, and I'd watched him mistype his own password twice did not appear. This would matter when he tried to allege I had hidden money to avoid child support. In the school logs, my initials appeared consistently at pickup 3 days a week, sometimes 4. The PTA list showed I had helped plan the movie night. The payment platform recorded my small donation for the popcorn machine. Not that popcorn decides custody, but lies hate detail. I redacted my daughter's classroom photo list and notarized my redactions. I executed an affidavit about my home cameras operation, attached screenshots of the equipment, serial number, and configuration panel, and scheduled a maintenance check. On paper, I looked like a man who trusts paper. That is a kind of armor. The next hearing was short. Scheduling discovery deadlines. The judge's voice the same pitch as the air conditioner. The bright tie attorney said, "We haven't been provided with any video, Your Honor," and looked at me like he'd rehearsed my flinch. I didn't. The clerk took my subpoena request and stamped "received" in a way that sounded like a gavel you could carry in your pocket. The cousin wore a cologne that smelled like green apples and hallway whispering. As we filed out, I saw the bulletin board again. A new notice: crooked camera maintenance this week, expect delays. I photographed it with the daytime time overlay enabled and emailed the image to Kaylee with a subject line: vital. That night I sat with the hum of the fridge and the faint curry spice smelling sweet as a memory that doesn't have edges anymore. I paged through my notes and circled the phrase, "keep it light." Who had said it first? The bright tie or the cousin? In which hallway? The surveillance would answer more than I was, at that moment, able to even ask. A small breath of cool air moved the sheer curtain near the window. Light pooled on the floorboards, and I felt the teak under my bare feet, warm like a held cup. I thought of all the times I had explained to project teams that scope creep isn't just a nuisance. It's a theory of how chaos thinks it wins. Here, the scope was my daughter. The footage came like a sealed envelope you open after a funeral. Slowly, with your thumb under the adhesive. Tamina called at 10:17 a.m. on a Monday. "Courier just delivered the drive from the courthouse vendor," she said. "Allie's already imaging it. Chenov custody is clean." They complied. My heart did the thing it does when a step on the staircase is lower than you expect, jerks and steadies at once. "There's a camera by the stairwell," I said. "I want to see what time the cousin held up his phone." At Ollie's office, the server rack exhaled warm dust. We wore nitrile gloves to avoid smudging the drive. Allie is ceremonial in all the ways that matter. On his monitor, the hallway appeared in shades of bureaucracy, cream walls, scuffed bench, the bulletin board with its paper flocking. He scrubbed through the timeline. At 11 hours, 9 minutes, and 17 seconds, our group exited, the cousin in front. Ah! Bright tie texting me a step back, Tamina adjusting a file. At 11 hours, 9 minutes, and 23 seconds, the cousin lifted his phone, smiled at the bright tie, and said, clearly enough to survive audio compression, "When we go back in, keep it light." I'll poke his name again. Bright tie nodded, didn't look up. The cousin laughed, said, "He'll rattle. You'll see." The camera caught the bailiff 2 meters away, glance, and then look away. Allie paused, rewound, played again. He opened the metadata panel. "Frame rate steady," he said. "Time code aligns with NTP server log. No drops." He cross-referenced the camera's event log. "No maintenance flag until later that afternoon," he added. We exported a 1-minute clip, hashed it, printed the hash, and notarized the printout with Tamina present. My hands shook, just enough to be honest. We filed a supplemental motion attaching the excerpt, with a request to enter the clip under seal until witnesses could be heard. We served notice to opposing counsel with a read receipt request. They replied faster than I expected. A short email from a junior at Bright Tie's firm. "We disagree that this is relevant to the best interests of the child." No greeting. No sign-off. A legal shrug. We added the email to our exhibits list. In custody cases, irrelevance is sometimes the loudest confession. The next days were procedural march and minor weather. I reversed one authorization my ex had slipped into the pediatrician's office file without my signature. I presented my joint legal custody order, and the clinic rescinded the change and recorded the correction. I set a meet and confer with Bright Tie. He declined, citing workload. Misbah visited my apartment. She drank the tea I make when I need to pour calm into the room lemon peel. Mint to clove buds Anne. She ran her fingers over the top of the bookcase where dust tells on you and found none. She looked at my daughter's corner. The small canvas bin of blocks, the pencil case with the cloud sticker, the bedtime chart with tiny gold stars. She asked about our routines. I described the ceremony of our Thursdays, biryani in the kitchen, balcony time. One poem, then lights out. Huda stopped by with a bowl of Kia and pretended it was an accident. Then the cousin made a mistake he thought was clever. He sent a message to the school PTA group. We should discuss whether school pickups are safe until the court finishes. He wrote, given some volatility. He used an ellipsis like a match. He didn't know I had asked Yusuf to create a read-only archive of all PTA messages and to whitelist Misbah for access. The message bounced into a PDF the moment he hit send, timestamped and archived. The PTA admin shut down the thread and wrote, calmly, "Custody matters don't belong here." The cousin fumed in direct messages, screen captured by someone who had seen enough. A mother I barely knew, Sana, forwarded the captures to me with a note. "This feels wrong." I added them to the file, redacted names except the cousins, and executed my affidavit of how I obtained them. Working in operations teaches you that most evidence arrives as a favor from someone who chooses quietly not to be complicit. I slept badly that week. The heat made the blinds buzz against the frame. A faint diesel smell drifted from the street and settled in the room like a stubborn guest. I woke at 3, reread Mizbah's initial report about my daughter's need for predictable transitions, and then read it again like it was a map through fog. I texted Huda, who replied with a single lamp emoji, and went back to sleep. Light, then ink, then light. We reached the hearing that mattered, like you reach a door you've seen in a dream already, knowing the hinge sound. The public stage wasn't the courtroom this time, but the community hall the court sometimes uses when the docket spills over. It was cooler there, high ceilings, fans that bothered to mean it. The chairs were arranged in 2 blocks with a center aisle. It's like a modest wedding where the vows are about calendars and toothbrushes. There were more people than I expected. A couple of PTA parents, my banker, Shazia, who said she had business nearby and smiled like she'd built a bridge just to walk across it. A journalist who had heard about judicial decorum, and the bailiff from the earlier day, who took a seat in back and kept his face as still as a statue's shoulder. The judge set the stage without fuss. We would address 3 issues: interim custody schedule, alleged financial instability, and alleged discourtesy in court. The last was a rare one to hear out loud. "We are officers of dignity here," the judge said, and the sound system made her voice feel like it came from a lake. "I won't have this court treated as sport." Bright Tie asked to speak first, and did what confidence men do when they know a camera might be pointed at them. He made himself smaller, humbler, a servant of process. He apologized for any misconstrual of tone, and argued that the alleged hallway remarks were out-of-context banter unrelated to the child's welfare. He then pivoted to a spreadsheet he claimed showed my unusual liquidity behavior. He pronounced it like a diagnosis. The cousin sat behind him, hands folded over his phone, eyes hooded like a cat that wants to watch a vase fall. Tamina waited 1 beat after he finished, then stood. She began not with a video, but with what videos protect: sequence. She walked through the bank logs, Shazia on the aisle, nodding as if to bless each line. She noted the maturity dates, the transfer caps, the automatic sweep. "These are recorded, certified, and routine," she said, letting the word routine sit like a blanket over a draft. The judge nodded. Mizbah raised a hand slightly, small as a sparrow, confirming the stability in her observations. Then, and only then, did Tamina touch the sealed envelope with the drive image. "Your Honor, we have a short excerpt with verified metadata relevant to counsel's representation about tone and to petitioner's credibility when he says he felt targeted." The judge looked at Bright Tie. He half shrugged that aristocratic nothing that tries to end conversations. The clip played. The community hall had the good sense to be quiet. At 11 hours, 9 minutes, and 23 seconds, the cousin's voice filled the room. "When we go back in, keep it light. I'll poke his name again." The laugh was the same one that had made the glass tremble. The judge's face did something private. Bright Tie kept his chin level, but his throat moved. The bailiff in back looked briefly at the floor. Hudo's hand found the back of my chair and rested there. Ali, who had come because he appreciates endings that respect chain of custody, scribbled the hash on his pad and underlined it. The judge asked the bailiff if he recalled the hallway event. The bailiff stood and, in a voice that sounded like a receipt being torn very straight, said, "Yes, Your Honor." He described hearing the cousin speak and choosing not to intervene because it seemed like they were comfortable with it. He kept his eyes on the judge, not on me. "I was wrong," he said, and sat. Bright Tie rose, then wisely decided to remain seated. The cousin made a small movement with his mouth, panic or something like it, then recovered into the smirk he wore like an inherited watch. Tamina didn't look at them. She looked at the judge and said, "This is not about a name tag. It is about a deliberate strategy to unnerve a parent in a forum where composure counts." She then pivoted like a dancer stepping from tile to the PTA captures. The judge read the cousin's ellipses as if measuring each dot for weight. We moved to the home camera affidavit, the pediatrician's rescission, the school pickup logs, Mizbah's quiet but bright observations, my daughter's painting of a fish with 2 eyes on one side, the way she says Thursday like it is its own country. The room resized. People sat straighter. The air cooled, not in temperature but in meaning. When it was my turn, I took one step, then another, and spoke the sentence again, not as surrender, but as charge. Seems I'm not family. I let it hang a second, then finished the thought, the one the laugh had given me like a dare. That was the plan, to make me a stranger with paper and cheek. I am recording this not to punish a cousin too fond of spectacle, but to restore what the hallway tried to unbutton. The record of a father who moved money on routine schedules, who filed and served and complied, who keeps Thursday like a lighthouse. I named the verbs that had kept me this side of shouting: reversed, rescinded, notarized, recorded. I am asking, I said, and my voice didn't break. For time with my daughter according to the plan we filed. And for orders about decorum that will protect these proceedings from stunts. There was another step. The journalist, who had been silent except for the way her pen made tiny storms in her notebook, raised a hand. The judge frowned. This was not a press conference. The journalist lowered her hand. It didn't matter. The press would write the story whichever way the hallway tilted. The judge spoke for a long minute without looking at notes. She granted the interim schedule we had proposed nearly exactly, down to the Thursday lighthouse. She admonished Counsel Bright Tie first, then the cousin by name about conduct. She ordered all parties to refrain from commentary in public forums, including PTA groups. And she cited the court's inherent authority to regulate speech that undermines dignity in proceedings. She directed the clerk to correct my name in the docket and asked the clerk to read it out loud, slowly. The plastic tag on my blazer felt suddenly like an old name for a river no one uses anymore. The judge entered the video into the record and certified its chain of custody. Then looked at me and said, "Mr. Rahi, do not let their theater define your roles." It was not the kind of sentence that affects an appeal. It was the kind that makes a father breathe differently for the next 5 years. Afterward, people stood because standing is what you do when you don't know what to say. Shazia shook my hand with the seriousness of a teller counting out the last notes that make a sum exact. Misbah smiled in that small way she has. Eyes doing the work a smile sometimes cannot. Ali tapped the printed hash and tucked it into his folder as if rescuing a relic. The bailiff murmured "sir" and left with his head just a bit lower, which is the only apology I've ever treasured. Bright Tie packed his briefcase as if it were a hospital bag. The cousin stared at the bulletin board where someone had just pinned a fresh calendar. Dates, squares, boxes, things that hold. Walking out into the heat, Huda handed me my blazer over her arm. The air smelled like cumin and the metallic tang of rain that might or might not happen. A child somewhere was crying because a balloon had escaped. A vendor shouted the name of his fruit like a poem. I checked my phone. Yusuf had texted, "Movie night rescheduled to Friday." "Your daughter picked the film." Smiled. The note from the pediatrician confirming the rescission chimed in my inbox, stamped and scanned. I forwarded it to Tamina and deleted the duplicate I'd kept on my desktop trust, but verify, then tidy. A small wind lifted the corner of the community hall's doormat. I anchored it with my foot because sometimes justice is just noticing that a thing is about to blow away and stopping it. Then I went to the school to pick up my child. The next weeks moved like weather you can feel but don't need to watch. The cousin attempted a half apology through a mutual friend. I declined to receive it and sent instead a copy of the court's decorum order with the relevant paragraph highlighted. The PTA posted their revised guidelines. No custody talk, no triangulation, moderators empowered to freeze threads. Misbah filed her updated report, which included a paragraph about how my daughter had begun to draw us, with our hands touching the same pencil. The pediatrician's office updated their policy. No changes to parental authorizations without signatures from both legal guardians when orders require joint consent. The bank added a note to my account, stabilized transfers during litigation windows per client request. The journalist's piece mentioned no names but quoted a line about dignity that sounded like the judge but might have been the hallway. My ex-wife and I wrote, with the help of Tamina. A new exchange protocol keys surrendered during handoff. Codes revoked and then reissued on agreed dates. Letters filed with both our signatures for school trips. It all felt like unromantic magic. The cousin went quiet in public. I heard later he'd been asked to resign from a charity board after the video circulated discreetly among people who understand that laughter can be an instrument. Huda's younger cousin, Sanada PTA mother who sent the capture, stopped by one evening with her son and a bag of mangoes. We sat in the warm light of the balcony, the air a syrup we didn't mind. She told me she was interviewing for a new job and had rehearsed asking for her earned flex hours. And that somehow watching the hearing gave her courage to request it without apology. "It's not the shouting," she said. "It's the receipts." I laughed quietly and poured her tea. On a Thursday, my daughter and I made biryani and read a poem about a fish who wanted to be the sky. We drew with two hands a pencil line that curved like a bird. She asked why I wear a name tag at the court. I told her, so people know who I am. She considered this and pressed her palm to my chest and said, "I know." The balcony light made a halo on her hair. A car horn in the street below honked twice. The secret code of a city saying, "Okay." The air smelled like cardamom and new pages. I kept a small motif of that day, the misprinted tag. I didn't throw it away. I taped it to the inside of a folder labeled Courtnon and wrote, underneath in my slowest handwriting, my full name spelled right, twice, not for vengeance, for record. I slipped the sealed hash printout behind it like a talisman and closed the folder with a click that felt like a door finding its latch after months of weather. A month later, we returned to the same community hall for the final orders. The cousin did not come. Bright Tie wore a sober gray and spoke only to the points. The judge confirmed our schedule included language about cooperative decision-making and appended the decorum order to both pleadings. She asked if there were any outstanding issues. There were none. She thanked the guardian ad litem and noted into the record that this had been a case where process restored proportion. The fan's word, the smell of lemon cleaner, was less assertive. The bulletin board had fewer notices. When we left, I held the door for an older man who looked like he'd been awake since the 1970s. He said, "Bless you," as if I'd given him a small coin. Maybe I had in another currency. We walked into the white noon. My daughter tugged my hand. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. We could. We did. We ate it on the curb because tables felt like too much ceremony for that kind of victory. A drip slid down the cone onto my knuckle, and she laughed. A burst of clean water over stone. I wiped it with a napkin stamped with the shop's name in a font trying hard to be fancy. The shop had spelled my daughter's name right on the paper crown they gave her. She wore it like a verdict. When night came, I sat at the kitchen table with the window open a little, the curtain moving like a breath. I wrote a letter not to my ex, not to the court, but to myself. I wrote that I had sworn not to shout, and I had kept it. I wrote that a process is only as good as the hands that insist it proceed. I wrote that some laughs are receipts. You just need the right light. I wrote this sentence once more just to taste its changed edges. Seems I'm not family. Then I wrote everything that made it untrue. The Thursday lighthouse, the school gate, the dentist's sticker book, the chain of custody for a hallway that once thought it was a joke. There will be other hearings, other days when paper wants to be king. There will be a time when my daughter asks about what the word custody does to a room. I will tell her about the fan in the community hall and how it made the air honest. I will tell her about Huda's hand on my chair, about Shazia's nod, about Mizpah's sparrow hand, about Ali's underscored hash, about the bailiff saying, "Sir," like a stone placed back where it belongs. I will tell her that justice is rarely swift and never loud for long. I will tell her that dignity is a paperwork word until you make it a human one. If you've ever stood where I stood, shoulder under a vent that hums like a test you didn't know you'd be given, you know the weight of a syllable. You know how it can tilt a day. You also know what a clip can do. 1 minute verified against a server whose job it is to keep time honest. And maybe, in your city, in your hall, in your hearing, there is someone who thinks a name is a toy. Show them the quiet verbs. Show them reversal, rescission, notarization. Show them the way a judge can say your name like it's already written on the next page. I kept the tag. I kept the hash. I kept Thursday. The laughter belongs to the hallway now, as a lesson pinned to a corkboard under a maintenance notice no one reads twice. I go to pick up my daughter, and the guard at the gate asks my name. I say it. He repeats it back, right? And nods me through. The sky over the schoolyard is the color of an envelope you're not afraid to open. I walk in, and my daughter runs toward me, and every camera in the world can stand down. If this story gave you a way to stand taller in your own hallway, share it with someone who needs the quiet verbs. And if you want more dignified justice stories like this, follow along. I'll keep writing them so you don't have to shout.